All right, everybody, welcome to the video here for lesson number 4. Nice short homework assignment for all of you. It's only 3 questions. One of them is kind of a review question of what we did in lessons 2 and 3, and what was even kind of on your your quiz the other day. So we have to be able to solve the equation algebraically for t. So first thing we have to do is factor anything that's factorable in the denominator. So I'm going to factor t minus 9 to t plus 3 and t minus 3. So then we have to figure out, well, what's my common denominator? The common denominator, I'm looking at all the denominators I now have and seeing what I have and putting everything together. So the first one has a t minus 3, so I know that has to be in my common denominator. I have a 2, and the last one has a t plus 3. That's the only thing that's different. So we have a common denominator of 2. I almost put x. Let's put the right variable here. T plus 3 and t minus 3. So then I want to make 3 fractions. And all 3 fractions, I want to have that same denominator. So I'm going to put it all down there on the bottom so that we can look and see, well, what's missing. Okay, so what is missing? So for the first fraction, I have the 4. That's already there. But what's missing? I'm missing the 2. So I got to multiply by 2. And I'm missing the t plus 3. For the second fraction, I have the 2, but what I don't have is the t plus 3 and the t minus 3. And for the last fraction, I have everything but the 2. So now I'm looking at this and I'm saying all my denominators are the same. So now all I care about is the numerators. So I'm going to make an equation that just has those numerators in it. So 4 times 2 is 8 times t plus 3 plus t times t plus 3 times t minus 3. I'm hoping at this point we see that and we think, well, I could just unfactor that and make it t squared minus 9. If you don't see that, make your boxes, t and 3, t and minus 3, and multiply it all out like we normally would have done all the way back in lesson 2 of unit 1. On the other side, I have 12 times 2. That's easy enough for me to do. That's 24. Then I have some distributing to do. So I do some distributing, and I have 8t plus 24 plus t cubed minus 9t equals 24. To solve an equation, I want to put it in standard form, and I want to make it so that all of my variables and numbers and everything are on one side, so it's equal to 0. So I'm going to rewrite that as t cubed. 8t and negative 9t is negative t. And if I move 24 to the other side, well, guess what? They both cancel. So then that's just equal to 0. And then I'm going to try and factor to solve. So I'm looking at that and I'm saying, well, it's 2 terms. It's not difference of 2 cubes because t to the first power is not a perfect cube. So the only thing left to try, well, is GCF. Take out t. And then I see t squared minus 1. Well, that becomes t plus 1. And then t minus 1. Set each part equal to 0. T equals 0. T equals negative 1. And t equals positive 1. Then I want to figure out if each one of those potentially can make the original fractions undefined. So my undefined values here are t cannot be plus or minus 3. Since none of those are a solution, all 3 of those answers are potential answers to this question. A really good question to review before your test next week. Number 2, word problem similar to the one we did in class. So it says Hunk can paint a fence in 5 hours working with Tom, so that's together. 2 of them, or Huck can do it in 5 hours by himself. Together, they can paint it in 2 hours. How long does it take for Tom to paint the fence alone? So we have Huck's time plus Tom's time is equal to the together time. So Huck can paint one fence in 5 hours. That's his rate, his painting rate. Tom, we don't know. So I'm going to make the variable t for Tom. Together, we know they can do it in 2 hours. One fence in 2 hours. So essentially, I'm using the rate of, well, I don't know what I just did there, the rate of fence per hours. Right? If it said Huck can paint 2 fences in 5 hours, I would have made the numerator 2. But luckily for us, it's usually always 1. Then, just like we did above, we need to find a common denominator. So the common denominator here is 10t. Why is it 10t? 5 and 2 have a common denominator of 10, and we just have to include t in there so that we have the variable. So then if we make everything 10t, the first fraction I'd have to multiply by 2t. 1 times 2t is 2t. The second fraction I have to multiply by 10. 1 times 10 is 10. And the last fraction I have to multiply by 5t, so that would be 5t, because 5t times 1 is 5t. Now, just like before, I don't care about the denominators, so I have 2t plus 10 equals 5t. Subtract 2t, and I have 10 equals 3t, divide by 3, and I have t equals 10 over 3 hours. I don't have to put that in my calculator. I don't have to estimate it, right? If I wanted to, I could say 3 1/3 hours, but that's good enough. Number 3 says the difference in average speed of 2 trains is 16 miles per hour. So that means the fast train speed minus the slow train speed is 16 miles per hour. Remember, distance is equal to rate multiplied by time. So if I want to find the rate, it would be the rate is equal to distance over time. So those are going to be my fractions. So the fast train is going to go, so the second sentence says a slower train takes 2 hours longer to travel 170 than the faster train takes to travel 150. So the fast train travels a distance of 150. The slow train travels a distance of 170. And it's all equal to 16 still. What are my denominators? So we want to find the speed of the slower train. So the slower train takes 2 hours longer than the faster train. So if I make the faster train t for time, the slower train is going to be t plus 2 because it's 2 hours longer. So what's my common denominator here? My common denominator is t times t plus 2. So if I make all 3 fractions, including the fraction of 16 over 1, have a denominator of t times t plus 2. The first fraction, the only difference there is the t is the same, but I was missing t plus 2. So I have 150 times t plus 2. The second fraction had t plus 2, but was missing t, so 170t. And the last fraction had nothing, so it's going to be 16t times t plus 2. Multiply everything out, so I have 150t plus 300 minus 170t is equal to 16t squared plus 32t. Combine up some like terms, so I have 300 minus 20t. Sorry if you can hear my dogs, they're morons. And then we can move some terms across. So move the 20t across and move the 300 across. So I have 0 is equal to 16t squared plus 42t minus 300. Everything here is a common value of 2, so I could divide everything by 2. So I have 0 is equal to 8t squared plus 21t minus 150. And then I want to try and factor. Now this factoring is going to be tough because I would have to use the AC method and do all of that. So instead of doing all of that, what I could do is graph it. And I just did some adding wrong. This should be a 52, which means it actually has a common value of a different value here. So if we divide everything not by 2, but by 4, this becomes 4t squared plus 13t minus 300 divided by 4 is 75. Now, this is not an easy thing to solve for, like we were just saying. So if I do 4 times negative 75, I get a really big number, and then I'm trying to figure out what multiplies to that really big number but adds to 13. So instead, we could cheat a little bit. So if I go to my graphing calculator, so if I do 4x squared plus 13x minus 75, I get this graph. And the nice thing here is one of the 2 points, which you could see right in your table of values, is 3, 0. So that's a 0. So if I have a 0 of 3, that means I have a factor of t minus 3. Why does that help me? Well, I already know one of the 2 factors. So then I could do some reverse thinking and say, well, what multiplies by t to make 4t squared? Well, that would be 4t. What multiplies by negative 3 to make negative 75? Well, that would be positive 25. And I've just figured out my 2 factors. So then I can solve and say t equals 3 and t equals negative 25 over 4, which is a totally acceptable solution, but not in the context of the problem. I can't have negative time, right? We're not Doc Brown traveling back in time, right? So if I have t equals 3, that means the fast train goes 3 miles per hour, or travels for 3 hours. And the slow train travels for 3 hours, or 2 hours more than that, so 5 hours. So then it wants us to figure out, well, I want to know the speed of the slower train. So I know how long it takes for the slow train to travel. So if I do 170 divided by 5, I get 34 miles per hour. This question, although is in the curriculum, has never been asked on the Regents exam. It's a good question. It's something I could totally ask you on a quiz or a test, but to be honest with you, I'd more likely ask you something like number 2. Okay. Hopefully this video helps. Sorry it was a little bit long. It's only 3 questions, but they are kind of tough to explain. All right. Hopefully this helps. And remember about the quiz retakes, those of you that didn't get a chance to do it today. Right. Everybody at State After School definitely got better scores on their quiz. So please make sure you're doing that. All right. I'll see you all tomorrow.